Hello, welcome to this video explaining the equipment and skills used for the Hellborn torch build. This guy uses guns and grenades to apply burn status effects to melt his enemies. He does not use melee at all, not even BuzzX Rampage. So if you're looking for a build that lets you run in close and hit enemies with your BuzzX, maybe check out the Hellborn melee build on the Ultimate Badass Build Guide. But this guy, he's working well without melee. So the best class mod you can use is the Legendary Torch class mod. This will give you the highest increase to burn damage. It also gives you some crazy fire rate because of the points that it gives you to Embrace the Pain and Elemental Elation, which both increase your fire rate. Embrace the Pain here, that's a massive increase to fire rate while your shields are down, and they are always down because we're running with a Rough Rider. You can use a Psycho class mod instead. If you do that, you're going to lose some burn damage, but you will actually get some extra points in Feed the Meat, which will increase your max health further. So instead of getting a 50% increase in your max health, you'll get a 100% increase in max health, making you just a little bit tankier. Now with this one, I am increasing my max health with the Rough Rider that we have equipped and a Relic and Feed the Meat as you saw before. The reason why it's good to have a large health pool with this build is because when a fight ends and you're still on fire, you are highly unlikely on burning to death because you've got the damage reduction from the Rough Rider and you've got a lot of health to spend if you need to. Now we are using guns and grenades to apply status effects, but when we're using guns, because of the increased fire rate, they will apply status effects much faster, but they do less status effect damage. So we got 730,000 damage per second from my gun as opposed to my grenade. So I'm using an anti-fection that does 1.3 million status effect damage per second, and it can also ignite multiple enemies in an area as opposed to just nailing one at a time with the gun. So it's useful to have two options here. I'm using the slow hand to slag. The reason why I'm using the slow hand is because these Moxie weapons give you some additional healing while they are in your hands. So while I'm running around slagging things, I'm still getting a pretty good boost to those heals. And I'm using an Unkempt Herald. It is the highest damage dealing gun in the game. So of course it's on pretty much every build I'm recommending. Unfortunately, I would like a bit more variety, but that's just not what's provided here. The reason why the Unkempt Herald's there is because you've got enemies that are resistant to fire, but more importantly, you've got enemies that cannot receive status effects. So you won't even be able to use your corrosive weapons to apply those status effects. And even if you did, you're not getting any additional bonus damage to corrosive or electrocution anyway. So using an explosive weapon will be your best bet to handling those enemies, and the Unkempt Herald is going to be your best option there. So with the skills, since I'm using the Unkempt Herald, I do have points in Strip the Flesh. The other thing that's useful is Bloodbath, that if I kill an enemy with a grenade or an explosion, this will activate, increasing my gun damage by 2.5% per stack of Bloodlust. At 100 Bloodlust, that's 250% increased damage. So when I'm killing things with the Unkempt Herald, there's a good chance this will activate, which will increase that gun's damage significantly. Now, it is mostly invested into the Hellborn skill tree. We have also gone into the Bloodlust skill tree for Blood Splosion and some points in Mania. So working down here, the main feature of this guy is being able to apply status effects and burning enemies to death. So ways to apply status effects, we've got delusional damage. So with these first tier skills, you can only ignite enemies with fire elements, fire elemental weapons and grenades. With delusional damage, you can now do that with slag, corrosion, or shock. The main thing here is slag. So while you're slagging things, you can light yourself on fire. When you're on fire, you get all these benefits. So Burn Baby Burn is much more effective. Instead of just doing the 70% static bonus burn damage, when you're on fire, you get an additional 150% burn damage. So that's 220% burn damage while on fire. Numb Nerves, you need to be on fire for that to be able to provide you that damage reduction. Elemental Elation will only accumulate stacks while you're on fire, and when you lose that on fire effect, they start to decline. And Raving Retribution is only active while you're on fire as well. Pain is power. You won't get much benefit out of this skill unless you're on fire. While you're not on fire, it takes away 25% of your critical hit damage and adds it to your base damage. But when you're on fire, that base damage goes from 25% to 50%. So it gives you an additional 25% weapon damage while you're on fire. Fire Fiend, the main thing about Fire Fiend here is to increase the reload speed, and I haven't put additional points into Fuel the Fire because that 280% increase is enough. You can up that to 400% if you want to, but it's just not needed. I'm sitting here saying it's not needed, but I'm thinking it is bloody handy for igniting things with grenades, having that at max points. And, you know, with your submachine guns, which have a relatively low elemental effect chance, having that at max is pretty handy. I have put 7 points in the Flame Flare. This will keep your on-fire effects burning for longer. The 7 points gets that reignite chance over 100%. Anything past 100% just gives it a chance to reignite again. So enemies shouldn't be alive for that long for you to need a third ignite from this skill. But having that 100% chance, keeping it rolling is really handy. Now you have Elemental Empathy. This is what keeps you alive. So if you can ignite multiple enemies using your grenades, Raving Retribution will be hitting different targets. Assuming you've got enough elemental effect chance to be reliably applying those status effects, Elemental Empathy will give you healing from all of those sources that are under damage over time effects. You cannot heal from simply shooting an enemy with this skill. It's only heals from damage over time or status effect damage. So with Elemental Elation, that increases your fire rate magazine size. That's complemented with Blood-Filled Guns, which also increases magazine size, and Embrace the Pain, which increases fire rate. Over with this one, I said Fire Fiend was about the reload speed. That's complemented with Nervous Blood. We talked about Bloodbath. Boiling Blood is so you can keep those Bloodlust stacks for longer. Blood Twitch is so you can swap between your weapons for faster. Now, Blood Splosion, if you can hit an enemy with something hard hitting like a fastball, this can deal some crazy damage. The biggest effect it's going to have though with this build is just when an enemy dies from a burn effect, it will apply that burn effect to enemies around it, or it has a chance to apply that burn effect to enemies around it. So that's probably the main focus of Blood Splosion here, and it's just because I didn't want to go to the Mania section. Now, if you wanted to run this build with shotguns, you can take a point from Flame Flare and 4 points from Fire Fiend, and you can throw it into Salt the Wound for some additional shotgun damage. So that'll give you, 100% additional shotgun at max stacks. Otherwise, your other option is to move those 4 points from Fire Fiend to Fuel the Fire, so you can apply those status effects more easily. So hopefully that explains the skill tree and the equipment being used, why it's being used. Check out the gameplay video and you'll see it all working together. You'll see there are times when I apply the status, burn to a lot of enemies and they're all slagged, and then I might use the Unkempt Herald to take out a few tougher enemies. This like guys with rocket launchers and things that I don't want hanging around and burning to death slowly. So it all works together. It works quite well. Enjoy.